On this episode of Hockey Inside Out, Carey Price makes a comeback, and just how big is Brendan Gallagher's heart? Welcome to Hockey Inside Out. I'm Adam Susser. Today we have Hickey and Cowan from the Montreal Gazette, as well as TSN 690's Dan Robertson. Thanks for being here, Dan.
My pleasure.
Let's look at what we're talking about on today's show. Number one, how do you explain Carey Price's regaining of form after missing 10 games with a lower body injury? Number two, the Canadiens' penalty kill was perfect against Buffalo and Columbus. What's changed? Number three, how can you explain Jeff Petry's greatly improved play? Number four, can Brendan Gallagher maintain his high-flying pace all season? And number five, what are your first impressions of defenseman Jakub Jerabek? Let's begin. Well, after a mysterious lower body injury, Carey Price is back, and I don't know if you watched the first two games of his return, but I did, quite closely as a matter of fact. And if there's one thing that I can take away from watching those two games, it's the fact that the Montreal Canadiens are, without a doubt, going to win the Stanley Cup this year. So with that in mind, how do you explain Carey Price's sudden return to all-world play after missing 10 games due to injury?
It's a good question. It's I think maybe just the time away from everything maybe helped him, maybe clear his mind, get focused again. But to come back the way he did after 6 days not on the ice at all, came out to a full practice and the next day in the game and played well. It's surprising, but I mean he's Carey Price again. At least he looks like he's Carey Price again.
I think it's probably a good indication that he was injured before he got shut down. They talked about have something happening in one game, one particular game, something like that. But the start he had was just not Carey Price. And I think there were things bothering him before that, whether it was mental, whether it was physical, whatever it was. He just wasn't himself. And we're back to seeing Carey Price as Carey Price. We're also seeing the team rally around him. The team plays better. He gives them confidence, and you've seen that in the last two games.
You're not suggesting the Canadiens weren't forthcoming with an injury? First time for everything, right?
Well, the thing is, sometimes unless the player says he's injured, I mean, players don't want to come out. This is the bottom line. When people talk about the concussion protocol, for example, a lot of times a guy will get his bell rung or something like that. He doesn't want to come out. Especially, if a guy is in a situation where he's hanging onto a job, and or he's got a bonus for goals or points or assists or something like that. Athletes want to play.
For me, I think it's almost like it was mental more than physical. I mean, I can't be sure, but from the start of the season, he wasn't athletic. His lateral movement wasn't great. He wasn't reading the play well. Then he goes out of the lineup, and he took longer than a lot of us thought he would because he said, I'll be back soon. But it obviously paid off. He took his time. And it reminds me of last year, before Michel Therrien got fired, he wasn't playing well. And then when he did get fired, when they came back after that break, he was great. So, it's a two-game sample of what we've seen so far. But if you keep set up, I mean, you never know what can happen.
And you had the goalpost for his friends the other night. He has 3 goalposts against Columbus, so things are looking good for Carey Price.
Do you think he'll be able to maintain this? Do you think he'll be the Carey Price we know and love all season?
That's the $84 million question, right? I mean, he's had a history of lower body injuries, so we'll see if he can stay healthy.
Okay. The Habs penalty kill has been struggling all season, but the 2 games against Columbus and Buffalo, they went 7 for 7, didn't allow in a goal. What do you think's changed? Any ideas?
Well, first of all, it was Buffalo and Columbus. Buffalo's a bad team.
What did I say?
No, it is. You're right.
Yeah, Columbus has the worst power play bad
teams. Yeah, Columbus for some reason, Adam. They have the worst it was 9.7% going into that game.
John Tortorella says he doesn't want to talk about it.
Unbelievable. And then Buffalo's a bad team, and Carey Price is back. So that's the 3 things for me. But you bring up a good point because it's been horrible, and unless they can get it together, usually they have a power play that struggles. That's been the case too, but that's almost offset by a pretty good penalty kill. Well, not this year. They have to bring it around.
And your goalie's your best penalty killer, and Carey Price is playing well.
Carey Price made 10 saves while shorthanded the other night. We also got 3 blocks from Jeff Petry, including one he took off his foot. Yeah. And I was surprised he came back, but he just needed to shake it off a little bit. And so.
That was a tough shift for Petry. He took 2 off the feet, and then he almost got one in the head. I think he was upset after the game. That's one of those shifts you're just happy to get off the ice. He went, yeah.
Yeah, and Jeff Petry is another guy who's been struggling all season, but in those 2 games, he looked like the Jeff Petry from last year. Scored against Buffalo. What do you think's changed with him?
he actually looked like the Jeff Petry from 2 years ago when they first got him from Edmonton. I think the injury to Shea Weber was probably the best thing that happened to Jeff Petry. I think it put the pressure on him. He had to step up. They needed somebody to step up and fill all those minutes. He played 29 minutes against Columbus. So I think it was a case of he realized he really had to step up, and he did. And he was talking about how skating is his game, moving the puck, and he said he needs to get in the game early, either through skating or throwing a hit, and he realizes that. So it'll be interesting to watch him going forward, his first shift every game, about how he tries to get involved either through skating or throwing a hit. But he's really played a key role with Shea Weber out of the lineup.
He's played 29 minutes in at least 2 games this year in this last couple of weeks. And I think Stu makes a valid point there. When Shea Weber went down, he realized that he had to step up a little bit. Carl Alzner is feeling more comfortable. I think the whole defense, the defense hasn't been their problem. You thought when Shea Weber went down, this team was through. But, he's been out for 5 games now. The good thing is the way the defense is playing, they're giving him time, Shea Weber time, to get back to 100%. So it's a bonus there. But the entire defense has played really well.
We mentioned Petry's getting a lot of the credit, but Red Alzner played well with him.
It's just too bad Petry didn't shoot left, so they could put him up there with Weber when he comes back.
That's true.
So why do you think these two players are suddenly playing well? I don't see the connection of Shea Weber being out. It's not like there's one defenseman that carries a team.
Well, to me,
Shea Weber does. Pretty much.
Yeah,
I mean, Shea Weber plays 28 minutes a game.
That's not how it should be.
Well, that's why they got him. I mean, Shea Weber. That's who Shea Weber is. He's your stud defenseman who's out there and plays all those minutes. And as I said, Jeff Petry has never been the stud defenseman. He's more of the shiny defenseman, the one who can really skate and move the puck. But he's really stepped up and played like a stud defenseman.
I think Alzner's getting more comfortable in the system. I think that he's limited physically in what he can do. He's not the speediest guy in the world, but he is a physical player. He's understanding that he has to do that. Jerabek, I think, has helped them coming in. Young defenseman, moves the puck well, skates really well. It's good news. Now we'll probably see David Schlemko coming back this week, and it'll be interesting to see how the dynamic changes a little bit. I have a feeling that we're seeing the beginning of the end of Victor Mete. Hasn't played a lot in the last couple of games, and I think they're going to let him go to the World Junior Championships, see what he can do there, and then make a decision on where he finishes the season.
The good thing about Mete, though, is they're not sending him down because he's played bad. If they do send him down, he can play in the NHL. It's just that now they have all these healthy bodies back and they have some depth. So it's sending him down to the junior will be a good thing, I think, in that he's proven he can play here. He knows he can play here. The Canadiens know he can play here, and then send him down to junior, let him play in the World Juniors for Team Canada.
They have size, the guys that are coming in, and that's the one thing that Mete doesn't have. Mm-hmm. And I think that what they want to do, they're reluctant to use him in situations against big physical teams. For example, Ottawa's coming in, and that's a big physical team. And as a result, they're trying to protect him. I think I'd give him a little more responsibility, even against bigger teams. But this is the way they feel they have to do it. But if he can't keep playing 7 to 8 minutes, he's got to play a lot. He'll get that opportunity if he goes to the World Juniors, and then he'll get that opportunity if he goes back to London.
Brendan Gallagher has been one of the few shining stars since the beginning of the season. He's scored 10 goals in his first 25 games. Do you think he could maintain that pace for the rest of the year?
I don't see why not. I mean, it's interesting. He had 10 goals in 64 games last year. And, of course, he had consecutive seasons where he had his hand mangled by slap shots. And to me, the concerning thing wasn't that he couldn't shoot very well or handle the puck like he used to be able to, but it seemed like he wasn't skating as well. And it's almost like he'd lost his way. I mean, he was still working hard, and you started to wonder. But, see, the thing with me is I don't think he will ever go into a massive slump because he always goes hard to the net where the loose pucks are. He has something working with Charles Hudon on the other wing, and Plekanec is kind of a nice veteran buffer between those guys. I can see him getting 30, and I think it would be a great story because, listen, I don't know how some players on that team can look at themselves in the mirror at night in the same dressing room with Brendan Gallagher, who is, I mean, Stu pointed it out in the dressing room not long ago. He said, did you see Gallagher's legs? They're like that. But, of course, he's, 3 apples high, and I say that with all due respect. I can't believe what he does every night. And, yes, I hope he hits 30 goals for sure.
Well, him and Paul Byron is another guy who guys must look in the mirror, the two smallest guys on the team. And you mentioned Charles Hudon. Charles Hudon was really impressed me. I knew he had the talent, offensively, but he plays a physical game. He's not afraid to throw his weight around. And I think with Brendan, it's as long as he can keep his hand out of the way of a slap shot this year, I think he'll do really well. And you were mentioning last year he didn't look like he was skating as well, but it's such a mental game, hockey too, and I think his hand will never be the same. He was saying the other day in the locker room that he can tell when it's going to rain the day before because his hand, you can sort of feel it. But Brendan Gallagher's work ethic is through the roof, and players who work harder are rewarded, and he's playing with good players. Thomas Plekanec is underrated. Brendan was in the room after the last game talking about how much Thomas Plekanec has helped them and the fact he's played with them all year. So I see a bright season. I see a really good season. I think he'd get 20 anyway, and as you say, possibly 30.
I think 20 is a realistic, somewhere between 20 25. He's a guy that gives you all sorts of heart out there. He should be the captain. If you're looking at guys who set by example, he's the guy who does it. He's the guy who does it, time in, time out, and I really enjoy watching him play. And that's a good line. He's given a new life to Thomas Plekanec. Thomas Plekanec isn't going to get 60 points this year, but he's going to get 45 to 50, somewhere in that range. And he's going to do all the defensive things that he's done for years and kill penalties. And I think that's a good line. I wish Charles Hudon would score a little more. He came in as a reputation for being a scorer in the American Hockey League. I remain to be convinced, and after 25 games, he's got 2 goals, and he got them both in the same game. I'd like to see a little more production from him. But Stu's right. He is a physical player for a small guy. He works hard. He goes into the corners. He does all the little things. He's Jacob Delarose with not as much size, but with a lot more offensive potential.
I don't think any player want to be compared to Jacob Delarose right now.
Well, the thing is, he plays defensively. He plays that same kind of game. He plays a really heads-up game.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Defenseman Jakub Jerabek was called up last Wednesday versus Nashville. What do you think about him in his first 3 games back on the team?
First thing is, how do you pronounce his name?
Well, I got it down. Just said it like 50,000 times.
No, you're right.
Jerabek.
It's funny. I've heard. No, I went to him when he came, and he said, "It's Jakub Jerabek." I said, "Okay," and he said, "Call me Jakub Jerabek." And so I don't think you're not going to offend him. Whatever you say, I think you're right. To me, he's been. No, you're right. He's been quietly effective, and I like what they did with him. They put him in Laval until he learns sort of to play on the smaller ice, which I don't think even though we know that when players come from Europe, it's a smaller ice surface, I don't think we realize how tough that is. So he's 26. He's not a kid. He's pretty calm. He's a smart player. He makes a good first pass. I know that's cliche, but it is true. And, he'll take a bump. He may be a little slow, but for where he might lack speed, he makes up for it in intelligence. And I'm anxious to watch him over the next little while because I think he's been a good addition.
He also might be the fittest guy in the locker room. When you see this guy, you guys are ripped. He's got 0 body fat on him, I'm sure. It's surprising how for a guy who he's 26 years old. But it'll be interesting to see as he's getting used to playing on a smaller rink, and now he looks like he's getting a little bit more ice time. They had him using him on the point of the power play a little bit of practice today. And Charles Hudon also. So it'll be interesting to see how he does going forward.
I think he's a good addition. He's played last year in the KHL, so he played against elite players. He has made the adjustment very well. Particularly in the defenseman, where you're backing up and you've got to make reads quicker than you do on the bigger European ice. And I think he's made a really good adjustment. He's happy to be here, and he's played pretty well so far. He's gotten to the point where actually that's been bad news for. We talked about Victor Mete earlier. It's bad news for Mete because they play a similar type of game. He's a little bigger than Mete, and he's got that little bit of an edge and experience.
If the Canadiens somehow come back and get the playoffs, though, Victor Mete is going to be one of their keys because early in the season, he played 22, 23 minutes a game as a 19-year-old. He carried them through that first stretch of 5-10 games.
Well, we'll see if they make the playoffs. Well, that's our show for this week. We want to thank you all for tuning in. Like the video on YouTube, subscribe if you haven't already, and comment in the comments section, whether it's on the Gazette or on YouTube, because we want to know what you think about the topics that we discussed today. My name's Adam Susser, and I'll see you next Thursday.